Hello, welcome to the Academy of Management's 8th ever subject matter expert scholar panel. Thank you to our scholar panelists for their time sharing their expert research-based insights on these critically important topics today. And thank you to everyone viewing live and via recording at a later time. The Academy of Management, or AOM, is the preeminent professional association for management and organization scholars. Worldwide members are professors and PhD students in business schools at universities, academics in related social science and other fields, and practitioners who value knowledge creation and application. Founded in 1936, AOM features a global community today that is nearly 20,000 strong and spans over 120 countries. Today's panel is titled AOM Scholars on Earth Day and the Business Case for Investing in Our Planet. In relation to Earth Day, this panel will provide research-based, actionable insights on how academia at large, the business world, whether it's organizations, leaders, or employees, and private actors can be solutions to the world's environmental and climate change challenges via sustainability, innovation, and actions. For attendees, please submit questions throughout the entire panel via the Zoom chat function to be considered for answering by our panelists via the Q&A. We will review throughout and answer questions as they're posed if appropriate. For media that are viewing live or recorded, thank you for your time and coverage consideration. You can access all AOM research or interview the panelists by contacting press@aom.org. That's press@aom.org. Thank you for your time. Without further ado, I'll kick it over to today's moderator, Jörg Hofstetter of Edge Business School.
Thank you, Michael. I'm honored and delighted for the opportunity to moderate today's subject matter expert panel of the world's leading organization of management scholars. It's a privilege to have on this panel individuals who have been contributing to sustainability and whose work I've been following with joy for many years. Our panel today is just a few days ahead of Earth Day, a day for any of us to think about our practices with or on our planet, and to think about our future. When actor William Shatner, you may remember Captain Kirk, returned from his space flight in October 2021, he mentioned in particular how impressed he was by the beauty of our planet and by the fragility of our spaceship, Earth, that carries us so protectively through space. He reminded us as a captain to take good care of our spaceship as it secures our very own survival. So if we take this metaphor of taking care of our spaceship, this makes one think about maintaining. It encourages also to think about upgrading, about opportunities, letting old technology, but also old practices and habits go, and to substitute them with something better. In his 1988 book, Only the Paranoid Survive, former Intel CEO Andy Grove made the point that instead of fighting those who want your business, managers should engage in substituting their own business. And by being their own substitution, they remain in business. Can this approach help us in getting rid of practices that are both harmful and dated, that don't align with our values anymore? Help us better live with and on our planet Earth? From parliament and government rooms, new policy emerges. In the classrooms, educators experience substantial changes in how students think and what they aspire. In boardrooms, we witness new conversations. While for decades, business seemed trying to avoid changes requested by actors voicing environmental and social concerns. Now, opportunities are seen in new business models that are both sustainable and beneficial. Today in this panel, we want to speak about this emerging phenomenon of seeing the opportunity in today's sustainability crisis, the increasing willingness to invest into the planet, benefiting from different perspectives offered by our experts on this panel. And in a first round, I invite the panelists to give us a brief insight into their work and targets. Antonia, do you want to start first, please?
With pleasure. Thank you very much, Jörg. So I'm Antonia Wanner. I'm the head of ESG and sustainability for Nestlé. Nestlé is a food and beverage company. And when we speak about sustainability, we have quite a history in that. It all started, or let's say was part of the business model, was responsible sourcing, very much focused on human rights. Then when palm oil, the issues came to the surface, it was very much about no deforestation. And now we have actually embarked on a few further ones, which are encompassing the previous ones, so the responsible sourcing and also the no deforestation. This is the net zero journey. So we have set ourselves a target that by end 2050, we want to be net zero for our business and for the experts. I would like to add, this is without offsets. So this is purely through actions within our value chain and in our own factories, etc. So, and then there are some milestones in between, which are quite challenging. And why this is very much the work now together with the colleagues from supply chain. It is because 70% of our greenhouse gas footprint is coming from ingredients and another 10% from packaging. So anything we want to improve, it really has to come from there together with the suppliers, together with the farmers, because yeah, we have lots of agricultural materials. So this is one. And then the other one is on packaging. Also here, we don't want that any of our packaging is landing in the environment. And here we have two challenges. The first one is waste management infrastructure is not as it should be everywhere. And probably even in 10 years, it's not going to be great everywhere. So, which means we need to find packaging that is still appropriate in such a non-managed waste environment. And then on the other hand, packaging that is actually able to be recycled. And this is why we have also a commitment out there 2025, have all our packaging designed for recycling. And then the other one, we want to reduce the amount of virgin plastic, to have more recycled plastic and more paper solutions, etc. So I'm already going to stop here. We have also other commitments, water, etc., regenerative agriculture, but that all feeds into what I just described.
Thank you, Antonia, and thank you very much for sharing at least an hour with us. I mean, with what you just said, we all see that you barely find time to sleep with all these things ahead of you. Thank you. Sophie, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Jörg. Very happy to be here. I'm Sophie Bach. I'm an associate professor at Indiana University Kelley School of Business. My expertise lies in social entrepreneurship, which is the use of market-based practices to achieve positive societal change. I have studied over the past 15 years individuals engaged in social entrepreneurship, organizations such as social enterprises and their governance in particular, which I hope to talk about today. I have also, as a spin-off of my work, looked at what we call necessity entrepreneurs. So Jörg talked about opportunity, and that would be the lens of today's conversation. So I have questioned with co-authors and collaborators how entrepreneurship itself can be a force for good in more underprivileged contexts and bottom of the pyramid countries and situations. Recently, another point I'm hoping to bring up in today's conversation, I've been really intrigued by the types and the roles of communities when it comes to achieving societal change in conjunction with entrepreneurship. As an entrepreneurship scholar, we have tended to study the individual entrepreneur in their psychological traits or sociological experiences. We've studied organizations, and this is a lot of the level of analysis and endeavored at the Academy of Management, but we have forgotten, or at least not paid enough attention, in my opinion, to communities as a force for good. So I'm hoping to bring that angle today. Thank you very much.
I hope to bring that very much up. It's also, that's a very big, important thing we'll definitely have to talk about. Andy, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. I have been doing this for over 30 years, so I'm coming to a stage in my career where I'm closer to the end than the beginning, and that's forced me to start to rethink what I do as a full professor. And I've adopted in my head the idea of the elder. I hate looking in the mirror and saying that, but there's a stage in our career where one can play the elder, where you start to think less about your own career and more about those that follow. And you do that by mentoring, but also trying to change the institutions in which they operate. So a lot of my work has shifted in that direction, and I just want to highlight two pieces of that. The first relates to what we're doing right now. I feel that academia has become too isolated from real world concerns. And so academic engagement and public and political discourse has been a strong part of what I've been focusing on. And so I love what we're doing here. I love what the Academy is doing with these subject matter experts to try and get our work out into the world. And I love that Antonia is here. I love that we have a business person. We should have more business people, and we should have more engagement between these two. So we need to change the norms of academia. And that's the first piece of my focus on institutional change. The second is I sit in a privileged position as a full professor. And so I understand that the junior professors coming up, they want to get tenure, which means they have to take their research and fit it in with the existing paradigms, the existing theoretical models, the existing disciplinary journals. But the challenge is that that isn't going to do it. That isn't going to solve the problem. It's going to slow the velocity at which we're running into a brick wall, but it's not going to reverse direction. And so as a full professor, I can start to ask different kinds of questions and saying, wait a minute, climate change is not an environmental issue that fits in with institutional theory or resource dependence theory. We need new kinds of theories. We need new kinds of models because what we're facing is a systems breakdown. And to fix a system breakdown, you have to change the system. And that system is capitalism. And I'm not saying we should move to socialism or things like that, but this neoliberal shareholder model that's dominated since the 1980s is breaking under its own weight. And so we have new kinds of questions. What's the purpose of the firm? What's the proper relationship between business and government? Can we address climate change in a society and a market that's based on consumption and limitless economic growth? And so that's where my focus is going, is how do we think about the broader institutions? And I don't need to care about whether it fits into the dominant paradigms of our institute or our research domains. We have to change those research domains. So there's my brief introduction for where I'm coming from.
Thanks, Andy. And indeed, I mean, I've been following your work since decades. We need to bring the change to a broader scale. There's a lot of questions, and we see what actually attracts people. I think about Harari's work, which were full of questions and inspired people of asking questions. I guess we show that we understand by asking the right questions instead of giving the answers. Steve, over to you, last but not least.
Kia ora. Hello, my name is Stephen Cummings. I'm from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand, or Aotearoa to give it its Indigenous name. And I'm honoured to be here as such of a part of such a great panel. And I just want to reiterate the points that the other panelists have made about the importance of impact, the importance of being the change, the importance of this dialogue between academia and real life managers and executives. I'm a historian. My work is on the history of management, and my most recent book with my co-author Todd Bridgman is called The Past, Present, and Future of Sustainable Management. And what we did with that book is look all the way back to Indigenous thinking around sustainability, all the way forward to where we thought management began. And we sort of highlighted some different thinkers that we don't often see as part of the canon of management and management science. And in that work, we addressed the kind of questions that Andy and others have talked about, the questions of, why, what is the purpose of the firm? What is the purpose of management? What is the purpose of business? Because we have tended to assume that it's return on investment, financial measures are what we use to judge whether management is good or bad. And so my research at the moment with a team of people here in New Zealand is looking at Indigenous management approaches and how, for most, if not all Indigenous communities, there are very sophisticated systems of managing in a balance, not avoiding economic or not ignoring economic realities, but seeing those things in balance with social, environmental, cultural, values and measures. So we're really interested in the opportunities that Indigenous management can provide as a new way of thinking about what is the purpose of management. What are we doing all this for? Because I think, as Andy says, the way that we've done it the last, whether it's 20 years or 100 years or however far you want to go back in terms of industrial times, it is collapsing under its own weight. It's been so successful that it is destroying the resources that we thought perhaps were infinite. They're not infinite. And I think there are many approaches that we could look at to develop different models and new approaches, which I think are, I want to be really positive about that. I think there are some great opportunities and some great ways in which researchers can look differently at management in a more sustainable way and really make a difference. So I'm delighted to be a part of this panel, and thank you very much, Jörg, for moderating. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Steve. And when I listen to all of you, in a way, we hear that there's new values. There's a values conversation and saying, how do we evaluate? So what is it that brings us together? What prioritizes in the business context, as Antonia said, what do we want to do? I'm going back to the key value at the moment, which we want to overcome. It's in Earth Day, April 22nd. And this year's theme is Invest in Our Planet, calling on all to act boldly, innovative boldly, and implement equitably, creating a partnership for the planet, with an example being the United Nations SDGs. What is the future of business management practice or research and sustainability with this call to action in mind? Andy, you want to jump in first?
Sure. I mean, each one of us has our own lever where we want to affect change. And something I've been focusing on a lot lately is teaching. I know that our reward system says that publishing is what it's all about. I think that's misguided. If you want to talk about engagement and impact, some of the biggest impact we have is in the classroom. And I am encouraged. I'm finding that my students are ahead of us in wanting a change in business education that focuses more on the issues that they care about. It's not that profits don't matter. It's just that the cart is starting to lead the horse. Profits are an outcome from a well-run organization that has identified a market and knows how to serve it. And once you start to put profits ahead of that, or share price ahead of that, you start to have certain pathologies that are causing the problems we're facing, whether it's stock buybacks, CEO compensation, I can go down the list. But a company that is well run, profits are the measure of how well run it is, but we have to focus on what makes a well run company, and that's focusing on the issues around it. Our students are there. So I'm offering new kinds of courses trying to disrupt our, in my opinion, ossified curriculum. And so I have a course called Reexamining Capitalism. Students aren't exposed to Adam Smith, Joseph Schumpeter. I could go down the list. What are the foundations? Transaction cost economics. A lot of students have these bizarre notions that government has no role in the market, that regulation is an unwarranted intrusion in the market. That's bizarre. We need to teach a different way of thinking about business and develop a more rounded student. And I'll just close with this thought that I feel that business education is focused far too much on the how of business and not enough on the why of business. And the students are hungry for that. They are ahead of us. We need to start to serve them and give them what they're looking for. And that, at the end of the day, you wanted to have a hopeful conversation. It's my students that give me hope.
Sophie, you were nodding so much. I just invite you to go next.
Great. Yes, thank you. I tend to do that. Thank you very much. Great question and great insights, Andy. I'd like to add a few of mine in response, but collaboratively, I think elaborating the start of an idea to or the start of an answer to your question, Jörg, because starting with the classroom, I really resonated with what you said about the students in the business school don't think that the government has anything to do with what we do, right? And to me, the key, and since Andy has given us permission to be a little new paradigmatic today, the key lies in interdisciplinarity. Not an easy thing to do, but I see it in the classroom as well. I teach several courses on impact and social entrepreneurship, and I have students from the public policy school, the School of Government, joining my class, and they're telling me this is amazing. This is not how we talk about entrepreneurship if we talk about it at all in our school. But likewise, when I have these students in my class with mingled with the MBA students, they have these interactions, and the MBA students wake up and think, oh, there is all of that knowledge on public policy and government management. So I think it lies in interdisciplinarity, both in the classroom. So if we can have these mixed audience in the classroom, but also body of students, but also readings that come from outside of the pure, management research that is getting published in this list of amazing journals that the AOM is editing. I think we're doing ourselves a service in moving things forward in a way that is more collaborative, right? You mentioned the separation between, business is about profit and we shouldn't care about anything else. And I think this separation thesis is actually not doing us a service. And the SDGs, show it with SDG number 17, partnership for the goals, right? So I think this is really where that lies. And more recently, looking at communities, I started thinking much more and learning so much more. We have to educate ourselves as well on political economy and the commons, and looking at the work of Lynn Ostrom, who used to be here at Indiana University, and how she studied the governance of common natural resources, probably echoing some of the management practices that Stefan found in his research as they produced the book on indigenous management. So I think interdisciplinarity is a first step. And I'll just do one short other point, which relates to what Jörg said about values, right? That started entering the conversation. And I think that's really true. There is much more thinking these days around this idea of stakeholder governance and asking questions. What value does a well-rounded organization, to use Andy's term, want to create, and for whom? Who are the primary stakeholders? Who are the principal stakeholders? Maybe having 10 is overwhelming, but having more than one is probably a step forward. So I'll leave it there because I want to hear what the other think.
Thanks, Sophie. Antonia, I would like to take this in a second to you and let Steve come in first, because there are so many things that Sophie said that in a way relate to you, but let's listen to Steve more quickly.
Oh, goodness. I wanted to hear what Antonia had to say as well, but I'm sure we will do that. But thank you, Jörg. Yeah, I totally agree with what Sophie and Andy have said. And just picking up on Andy's point, I agree. Our students are already there. They're hungry. They're looking for different ways of thinking about businesses. It's partly because I think in some ways they're deeper thinkers than what we were when we were students. We were very much channeled into a way of thinking about business. I think social media and other media has encouraged them to think more broadly. But it's also because I think for the first time in a long time, they recognize they're not going to be better off than what their parents were. Financial models are not going to work for those people coming up behind millennials. They're not necessarily going to be able to afford to buy a better house than their parents, or have a better financial portfolio or a financial investment than their parents. So recognizing this, I think they're saying, hey, the financial model, we're not sure that it's working for us. So I think there's all sorts of reasons why our students are there. The market is there, I think, as academics and maybe as practitioners as well. It's our job to meet the market, and to then think about, well, what does this mean for research? I think what it means for me when I think about management research is that we really have to ask some big questions about what we take our dependent variables to be. Because I think there's an assumption in management research that the dependent variables, the ones that we use, they're financial measures. I was reading a review article by somebody talking about a new field of research, I won't say which one, in management. And they were sort of, it's one of those articles that said, well, what do we need to do now? This field has been emergent for 5 years. How do we solidify the research that we do? And this commentator, a leading thinker in this field, was saying, what we need to do is we need to show that the field that we're interested in, it leads to above average returns. Because if we can't show that what we're advocating doesn't lead to above average returns, and by this they meant financial returns, then people won't be interested in it. And it made me think, that's true. We tend to think that in the academy, that our research needs to show that we can improve a dependent variable, which is a financial measure. If you do some combination of X and Y, then it will lead to Z, and Z is a financial measure. And I think in terms of the future of research, sustainable management research, I think we need a broader set of dependent variables. Maybe what you do keeps financial returns around about the same, but it improves social capital, or it improves the environment, or it helps rejuvenate a culture or a community, or things like this. Now, our students, they're already there, as Andy says, and I think as Sophie reinforced, our students, the younger ones, they see this. And I think they're not the problem. I think, I can't speak for practitioners, but I think academics, the ones who have been in the academy for a while, we're the ones who need to change. And I think, I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that's entrepreneurship, right, Sophie? That's what entrepreneurs do. They see new opportunities and they adapt to those changing realities. So I'm excited about that, but I think it's going to be a big challenge for us in the academy to respond.
Thanks, Steve. What I hear through is that conversation on purpose. And I remember there was a piece by Jim Welsh, and I don't know who else was it, and it said, well, the purpose of medicine is health. The purpose of law is justice, and the purpose of business is. And Antonia, you might have seen in a lot of meetings where you said, well, what's the purpose of our company? And I guess we've seen 15 years and talking about what's the purpose. And some came up with very good answers and some others haven't. And it's a question around the purpose. And well, I may probably share that with the audience that you are a lawyer, you have a background in procurement, and now you're in sustainability. So that's quite a track record, and that shows us quite a lot of interdisciplinarity and eye-opening that Sophie was referring to. Could you share a couple of your insights, please?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. So first of all, couldn't agree more with everything that has been said. I would even say, meanwhile, management without purpose, it's impossible. And I make exactly the same experience as you with the students, with our young talents, as we call them. For them, the first question, even in the first interview, the question is, what are you doing to help people, to improve the planet? And some have even already very technical and specific questions where they want to know exactly what we do, how it's part of bonus, etc., etc. So it's very clear. And then, but it's not only because of the young talents why I'm saying without purpose not possible. It is also, when I translate all of this into the reality of a food company. Yeah, a food company is there to provide food, but not just any food. And in the current context, what this means is that we need to do our part to still be able to feed, so that the planet basically still can feed these 9 billion plus people. And this requires that we're not overusing the planetary resources. So it actually, what it means, and there comes now the interdisciplinary part, also the crossover with finance actually, we see an increasing correlation between mitigating risk to the business and also, let's say, and the opportunities, new business opportunities. I give you an example. So we see that in some areas, we're definitely, the meat supply will go down. The dairy supply will go down. So milk. Why? Because of climate change, because of other elements, because of farmers not earning enough. So then there are two ways how to approach this. First of all, if you say, yep, this is still a dairy product, that's still what people want. Great. So then I have to work with the farmer to improve the livelihood, to improve the conditions. So I still have supply. I do something for the people, working with the people, for the people and the planet. I do that. Great. That mitigates the risk of supply, and I'm doing good for the planet. But there's also the other option where it's inevitable. I'm not going to have an animal protein anymore, and I can actually replace it by a plant-based protein. This is then a new business opportunity. That's a new type of product. And this leads me into the opportunity piece where I actually came to the conclusion, any kind of what the business has to do is regeneration or supporting nature's regeneration so that we can stay within these planetary resources. But regeneration means innovation. It's just impossible to regenerate and to support regeneration without new solutions. We need these new solutions. And this is where then, again, academia is key. And we have many partnerships with universities, with research, because innovation, yes, it's startups, it's entrepreneurs. But when it comes about planetary resources sustainability, things need to make sense scientifically. Otherwise, it's not going to stick. Yeah, so this is key. So that's why we have on one side the mitigating risk, and that then is also has an impact, of course, on the financial reporting. It has an impact on the future of the business. So already that's why we need to operate more sustainably. But then it's really, it opens an array of opportunities, which is unprecedented, I would say. We have more duty to go into innovation, but we have also more opportunities today.
That's great. Well, thank you. And well, what I'm listening is we need so much new abilities. The purpose is one side. We need these abilities that we don't have ourselves. We need the interdisciplinarity. So we need the eye-opening. We need to jump out of the silos. We need to bridge the silos. All of the stuff that we heard before, right, in academia. This is not new. I'm thinking about the European Commission, who is addressing the transformation to the Green Deal idea they have with a concept they call the Pact for Skills, where they are talking about leaving no one behind. But in a way, it also shows there's a contradiction between those who are in the business at the moment, who probably need a kind of an updating on that. And then we have the young people, or the young at mind people there, and saying, well, I'm already there, as Andy pointed out, and saying, hey, I'm sitting in this classroom, don't give me the old knowledge, I want the new knowledge, because this is why I'm here, because I want to solve that. So that brings me to the questions, and how can managers in business practice benefit from sustainability research and education to enact creative solutions to their sustainability challenges and to benefit the planet? Do they need future-minded individuals or generations, young at minds, whatever that means, to be able to lead more on sustainability, ESG, or related topics? And today's business leaders, who are the masters of the linear economy, I mean, whoever is on top has been mastering the linear economy, can they turn into a circular economy thinking? Maybe, probably not alone. Maybe how could we create something like that? And it brings me to a comment that we had just from the chat, and saying, well, how can we as academia then partner with the practitioners to bring this kind of a mindset change that we probably need? And maybe I just return directly back to Antonia, and then we go back into the academia round. Please.
Yeah, look, I think it needs a mix. Certainly, at the top, it needs somebody with courage and with foresight. So, which is a good leader. Yes, that's the qualification of a good leader. It needs that person that says, okay, this is the purpose of the company. This is why we do what we do. And in order to fulfill that purpose, we need to go new ways, take new steps, etc. And then not be shy, launching a commitment, putting a bold target out there. So that's something we have in the past inside the company, sometimes a bit underestimated. We thought an internal target, that's maybe enough, and then everybody will move. Okay, fine. But a public commitment is even more powerful. So that is on the top, I would say. But then, of course, when it comes to implementation to make it work, how to get there, there are, I would say, two ways. So first of all, I come again back to this technical expertise. Indeed, it then needs a type of technical expertise in some areas which didn't exist before. I work today, in my team, I have some people who are called greenhouse gas accountants. That didn't exist when I studied at the time. So, and they are desperately needed so that we do the right thing, have the right reporting and have the right measures, etc. So, and also measure on the ground agricultural practices. So this is certainly the new one. Now, interesting enough, what I see, nevertheless, also the old ones, if I may say so, are absolutely critical. Why? And it was mentioned also earlier, particularly in packaging. I make the observation that the packaging we had like 30, 40 years ago it's more sustainable in today's understanding than the packaging we have today. Today we have all these mixes with, monolayers and so on. So anyway, without going into detail here, but it's actually something that's much more difficult to recycle. In the past, it was glass, it was cans, it was this, it was a simple box, that's it. And somehow that's then great when I have these colleagues out there who say, we've been doing this. Okay, let's try it again. Let's go forward by looking back. And both are actually needed.
Thanks, Antonia. Sophie, this relates to entrepreneurship in a way, right? I mean, this is jumping out of the box, doing things different. Is there any insights that we can get from your research area?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does certainly when it comes to corporate innovation and fostering the young talents. I'd like to go back to that point by Antonia, fostering the young talents and what they bring to the table. They may actually, be coming up with in the new organization as new hires with ideas. I also think that beyond that pool, there must be a lot of employees, maybe, and here, I would love to hear more about inside the company, like fostering this academic and business partnerships, because I may be making assumptions, but there may be a lot of energy in the company because we're all living in this kind of climate change, pressure era. We're all living it personally, right? And so we bring that to the corporation when we go and work there for so many hours a week. And so I think fostering that talent, having contests, or maybe you do that already, can be really fruitful for innovation within the corporate setting. I also want to draw a parallel between what Andy said about having the MBA students or the business undergraduate students being ahead of us. They're the new talent. They're pushing us. They're inviting us. They're almost forcing us, because we don't want to look embarrassing in the classroom, to kind of change our paradigm, rethink what we're researching, the way we're posing our questions, the point that Andy made earlier. And I have a feeling this is probably the same with Antonia when she recruits the new talents, right? They come in for a specific position with specific expertise, but on top of that, they have this individual purpose that they want to fulfill. Mm-hmm. And so I really feel that, to me, that's the seed of change. It's like bringing these people in the organization where they will fulfill their job requirements, what they were hired for, but also push the boundaries of the organization, or of whatever project they're working on, by asking different questions. So I think this is really where, back to the education, we need to change the business education and make impact and sustainability and climate change related topics in management education mainstream, and not just sideline. So more intentionality is what I'm calling for.
Thanks, Sophie.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, history books are full of these times when changes were needed. The establishment said, come on. And then there was kind of the younger guys and the alternatives kind of knocking at the doors and trying to overrun the system, and these conflicts. Anything we can learn from that into going to the future here?
Yeah, I want to pick up on something that Andy said about being an elder. And I mean, I think I probably put myself in that same category. And I think one thing that's been really interesting for us in the research project we're doing at the moment on Indigenous management is that I think that Indigenous communities probably have a better way, or at least a really interesting way, that the generations work together. They fulfill different roles. Now, often in the West, what we do is once someone gets older, they get more expensive. So what we want to do is get rid of the expensive human resources and bring in younger ones from underneath. And I'll tell you about a really interesting conversation that I had with some people who have this amazing data from Pacific Island nations, where they found that in these Pacific Island nations, the Indigenous young people did not want to go for promotion. And so the European people were very keen, the younger ones, to seek promotion, but the Indigenous people were not. And these researchers were saying, well, how do we solve this problem? How do we get the Indigenous young people to go for promotion? Because clearly they're not developed in the same way that the European people are. I remember thinking and sort of discussing this, and well, maybe that's not the problem. Maybe the problem is younger people seeking that promotion because they feel that's what they should do. Whereas when in the indigenous communities, one of the barriers was that it's very difficult for these particular communities to become the boss of someone who's older than you, because that messes with a whole lot of other social and cultural norms. And so rather than think, well, actually, let's think about how we manage. Let's think about what leadership is. Because I think in a lot of indigenous communities, elder people, this is good news for you, Andy, and good news for me too, they're there to provide a helping hand for those younger ones. So the younger ones are looking for older people to help them. They don't want to get older people out of the way. They need those people to help them think differently and to sort of channel that youthful energy that they have. And so I think the solution, it's partly those younger people who are demanding change, but it's also those older people who recognize that it's those younger people who have more of a stake in the future. So I think this is a problem for all ages and all generations, and it really requires different generations working together. And I loved Antonia's example of packaging, because you're right, go back 50, 60 years ago, and packaging was more sustainable. It wasn't cheaper. I mean, on a per unit basis, financially, it didn't stack up. But as we've sort of said, we've developed these models where short-term financial gain has become what we aim for. And it is really important to bring on board perhaps older generations who remember that it wasn't always that way. Using glass bottles or using wooden or paper packaging, or not using packaging at all. These are solutions that I think our younger people probably can't remember because it's not been part of their lifetime. So I think sustainability, the opportunity, I believe, and I think I'm hearing it from the panelists as well, and Jörg, yourself as well, is, how do we get those generations to work together? Each has a different role to play. And I think this is a common problem. And sustainability is not a problem for one generation or another. It's really about how we work together. And I think in terms of, people like Antonia who are actually at the coalface of implementing these changes, it's so great to hear that there are enlightened companies who are looking at how do we get younger and older people to share their experiences, different levels of energy, different levels of expertise, to provide new models and new ways forward. So that's encouraging, I think.
Thank you. These are rich conversations. Andy, you want to comment? And then I want to go into not only the generations, but then as a next one, I want to say how we work together across the globe. But Andy, first, your response to what we've been saying, I'm sure.
Okay, I'm going to try and bring in, there are 4 questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and they fit. I think they fit with our conversation here. How do we partner with business and civil society and the general public? How do we break down the ivory tower? I think is a central question here. There's a second question. How do you engage with business when business only cares about profits? That's not entirely accurate, and I would encourage academics to look at business and what do they see when they look at us. I've talked to business people and said, can you get involved in a project? And they say, if it's an academic paper, I want no part of it because it's going to take 3 years to come out and it's going to be theoretically driven and it's going to do us no use whatsoever. So how do we bridge the divide and start to work together on these problems? So in teaching, are we providing the kind of graduates that businesses need? Are there skill sets that they don't have? Are they coming with the right mindset to help them do things? And I'm not saying we just need to package students to serve business. We also can help business understand this is where our students are. So for example, I've developed a new program with funding from the Arthur Anning Davis Foundation called Management as a Calling, helping students find their personal purpose in life and how it fits with their career goals. Everything Antonia said says that this is the kind of thing that business would like more of. And again, the students are there, they're eating this up. They don't want to just be taught how to be an employee. The whole phenomenon of quiet quitting suggests that, and it doesn't just suggest, it tells us that students are very picky about where they get a job. And if it's not a place where they can flourish and really develop their whole selves, they're not going to go there. And so how do we bring business into our research? How do we do more transdisciplinary research? Too many academics come with this idea that, hey, we have the answers, and we'll just cast them upon our, uneducated minions. There's a phenomenon called the knowledge deficit model, which many academics adopt. And the idea is that your brain is half full. I'm going to pour my knowledge into your brain. You're going to think like me. You're going to make good decisions. That doesn't work. And so how do we understand things from another viewpoint? How do we bring them into our research to inform it? I really do believe that as we bring our work out into the world and engage people, our research questions get better because they're more applied to the real world. They're not driven by the new theoretical question of the day, which is quite faddish. But it is really pressing on questions about what are the new skill sets? What are these carbon accountants that Tony is talking about? How do we develop them? How do we understand them? And so all of this just circles around the idea, let's break the model that we have right now of here's academia, living in the promised land, having all the answers. Here's business. They just care about money. We're going to help them make more money and start to work together to find solutions, which is, at the end of the day, the great commons problem that we have. We're all in this together, and we got to figure out how to work solutions together.
Thank
Can
you,
I just,
Andy.
sorry, Jörg, can I just very quickly build on what Andy has said there? Because I think he's right, and what he's doing is absolutely the right thing. I think increasingly smart businesses aren't so interested in the academics, they're interested in our students. And so often what we find ourselves doing is acting as conduits. In Wellington, where I'm from, it's a capital city, so we're close to government. Often we'll get people from government saying, yeah, how do we talk to your young people? Because we're really interested in working with them. And I think for companies like Antonia's and others, often I think what we can be as academics is conduits between business and our students. Now, academics have a role to play in that. And it goes all the way back to what Andy said at the start, which is, I think if we took teaching more seriously, rather than saying, well, teaching is what we do reluctantly because what we'd rather be doing is research. We take teaching seriously and see that what we're here to do when we teach is act as this bridge or this conduit between businesses who have real problems and young students and older students who have real skills and real new ways of thinking about things. And how do we create work where those students and those companies can work together? It's been a big discussion in our place about ChatGPT and AI. One of the great things about micro internships or having students working with companies or government is that stuff's hard to do on ChatGPT, but it's so valuable when our companies and our governments can use business schools as a way of getting all that great energy and insight from young people. So totally endorse what everyone said here. The ivory tower, it's going to fall over anyway. So we might as well sort of start making our way down the stairs and get closer to where the community is and play a role, because otherwise no one's going to care if we're not here anymore.
I think one of the important things, teaching is not a one-way street. And I guess what we see now in education is it's not that there's someone telling others. It is a collective learning experience that includes the educator herself and himself in that process. So it's a totally different dynamic that is out there. What I'm hearing here is it has also a lot to do with respect in a way. Respecting one another, the different disciplines, whatever we do. I mean, we can cross from different paths. People have been in academia, then in business, then in politics. Just understanding we have different hats and also respecting us as individuals. As you pointed out, we have a private life, we have a business life, we have ideas. So it's a respect for all of these different roles. And that brings me over to something and saying, well, in a way, we thought about collaboration, but even it's going into the direction of co-creation. It's a co-creation among those who are there. In sustainability, we talk about multi-stakeholders, but actually need to go beyond that. Which brings me to a question that Sophie had put the ball in front of the goal already. As Earth Day notes, improving the planet takes everyone to be aligned and on board. How can the global North, including scholars, practitioners, general public, replace this old mindset of resources from the global South towards the mindset of opportunities with the global south, which is not anymore up here and those down here, but level. Sophie, you want to start with this because you have
Yes,
already.
Great. Yes, I'll try to, well, be brief to that question and address a few others of the Q&A. Is that okay? Because they kind of
Sure.
relate to the way I'm thinking of this. So, and actually, this time you preempted my answer by saying co-creation, and I would go one step further, calling it co-production, in the sense that in my research, based on what I studied within the social entrepreneurship domain, I've studied hundreds, dozens, if not hundreds of examples where the global south is not used as anymore a resource extracting context, but more so as a beneficiary of all the good intentions of the global north, right? Which has caused like so much harm, like not only not led to doing good, but caused a lot of harms. And so this idea of putting everybody on the same level is really important. I think of social entrepreneurship with my co-author, Tom Lumpkin, as pro-social economic empowerment. And this idea of empowerment is itself problematic because it assumes that one has the power, like the minions that Andy was talking about in other contexts, right? That one has the power that he's trying to pour over the other one. But this idea of at least acknowledging power imbalances and trying to reset the balance a little in a more equitable way, I think is the first step. That resonates with what Antonia said earlier about helping the farmers, right? If the farmers, be they, I think some of them may be in the global south, if they don't see the economic opportunities, if they don't have skills to build resilience, to have at least a fruitful, medium-term future, everybody's losing, right? So I think this idea of co-production, working together, we've said like across disciplines, across generations, across the globe, I think we're gonna get there. And so to speak about some of the questions about how, what is the role of governments there? Going back to Stephen's invitation of thinking of a new DV, I like to think with my co-author Tom Lumpkin here as well, in terms of a broader conceptualization of wealth. And we call it civic wealth, but it includes not only economic wealth, but also social wealth and communal wealth, referring to the concept of social capital that Stephen mentioned. And for that wealth to be created, our thesis is that multiple actors work together. The entrepreneur, core to the agency of the examples we have studied, the community, as I mentioned earlier, and they could be from the global south, but not always. Lots of poverty in the global north as well, and supporters. And these supporters can be academics, which we've been, excited to talk about today. How can we collaborate more? Who could be doing some advising, but they're also government sometimes who are making opportunities possible or funding, providing a grant to that effort. And so I do think that government should be part of the conversation in terms of how they support these more community level initiatives. That's how I think about it. Okay, and quickly on how do you foster sustainable thinking and decision making with those getting climate change fatigue? I think it's a wonderful question. I'd never thought of that question. I will just say that what I use in my work with the students, with the social entrepreneurs, is this empathy mapping. So putting everybody concerned around the table and trying to understand why is there the fatigue? What are the root causes? What's causing that? Such that you can start addressing the problem, as opposed to say, yes, but we're going to find a solution, and the person is not receptive because it's not addressing the way that they're seeing the problem. So
great, thanks, Sophie. We're running a little bit out of time here, so I'd still like to get some of your views, and I asked to be brief as we want to do a final round. But Antonio, this all sounds like creating shared value 5.0, right?
Completely. No, Sophie, I think a great point, particularly this focus on understand the problem, the issue first. This is exactly then that's also what I found. That's the key to the farmer, and then to a solution that's certainly better than what was before. And so let me just one practical example. I was traveling to India just some weeks back, and here, I mean, the dairy industry is quite strong because there are many cows producing a lot of milk. Now, the footprint of somebody in India in terms of greenhouse gas is super low. It's much lower than anybody in Europe. Now, the mistake is then what sometimes happens, that the Europeans fly in and say, we tell you how to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions of your cow. Well, and then this is somebody who has in the winter no heating, who lives with a super low footprint, and I come from a heated room. Yeah, so that's not the right way. What works instead is exactly to what you said. It's understanding, where does the farmer have an issue? It's the cow productivity. It is maybe not have the right way to heat, to cook. Okay, and then picking on that measures and say, okay, let's tackle that first, but then let's see, eventually I can get a co-benefit which reduces the greenhouse gas footprint. But it's really addressing and working on what helps the farmer. What's the problem? How can I solve this? Farmer has then his or her problem solved. Better cow productivity, methane, which is coming from the cow to cook instead of burning the wood. I get the greenhouse gas footprint, which then is lower. Both win. And it even makes the farm more resilient because farmer earns more, etc. This is the win-win-win model what one has to get to. And meanwhile, I completely refuse if people come with anything else. But it all starts understanding the problem, tackling then the problem, and listening well, and finding, let's say, coaching the people to find the solution instead of just dumping it on them.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Antonia. And I guess one of the big learnings really is to understand the context in which these others are. And I remember a WTO meeting, sitting in there with the usual suspects, different governments, and all of a sudden there's this gentleman standing up from Africa and says, you are always talking about us, you should be talking with us.
Right. I love that. Yes. Yes.
For me, I had no more points. This was the time to leave the meeting and start doing things differently. And I'm also told that we're running out of time. We have run out of time. Still, what we have time for is to invite each of you for a very last statement. If you could name one top piece of advice for organizations or the leaders to be enacted today to help provide real solutions for the sustainability challenges humanity is facing today, what would it be? Andy, do you want to start?
Boy, I don't know how to do this. There is no one piece of advice. I would just think about it in the context of time. I mean, so much has changed, and the pace of change is accelerating. For the young scholars out there, I want to point out that when I started my PhD, business school professors didn't want to be on my committee because they didn't think the natural environment had anything to do with business. I got turned down for my first job when they said, we love your stuff on organizational theory, but we think you're too focused on the environment. Look at it today. The attention on this issue is huge. I've never seen it so high. And so business professionals and academics recognize the arc of time and recognize the trajectory at which we are focusing on these issues, embrace it, and just keep pushing forward. Don't be afraid to be bold.
Thanks, Andy. Sophie, you want to continue?
Right. Well, one way to think about it, one piece of advice would be to not only take the problem and understanding it in context, but also at the level of analysis at which it is experienced. So there's some questions we couldn't address, unfortunately, about consumers. So is it an individual level problem, an organization level problem, a community level problem, or a governmental level problem? And think about how different solutions probably are catered for these different levels. I think that's important.
Great. Thank you, Sophie. Antonia.
Yeah, I would say work with the people, then it works for the planet as well.
Thank you, Antonia. Stephen, you know these rounds always end with a historian.
Okay, well, I think, just building on the global south versus global north, I mean, I think often a good way of thinking about it is it's the colonizers and the colonized. And I think with colonization, you feel as a colonizer that you have a better way of doing things. But it's been really interesting working on a project with people from Copenhagen Business School on maritime entrepreneurs. And they're very interested in the way in which different maritime entrepreneurs in different parts of the world through history have looked at things. And so I've been interviewing some people on Tahiti, Polynesian navigators, which is a way of navigating without instruments. And talking to some of those navigators, they say, well, when Western people look at what we do, they often think it's a kind of magic. Isn't this magical that you have this spiritual connection with the world, and based on the winds and the currents and the waves and the nature, you can do this. And this one woman, this navigator, said to me, she said, it's not a kind of magic. It's just a different kind of logic. And I think it's really important that when we look at indigenous communities or the global South, or however we want to put it, that it's not that somehow they're underdeveloped or that they have this spiritual connection with the planet. It's a different logic. And in that logic is real value. So for example, with my team, looking at indigenous strategy building, we've worked with those communities to create a framework which works for them. A strategy canvas which has 5 bottom lines, starting with cultural bottom lines, moving through social, political, environmental, and at the top of the mountain, as people in that group said, the snow at the top of the mountain is economic development. But if you don't have a mountain, that snow just melts really, really quickly. So I think, what gets measured gets managed. My one piece of advice is, if you really want to see change, really think in your company or think in your research about what it is that you want to measure. Because I think, as Antonio said earlier, mentioning those greenhouse accountants, we used to think we couldn't measure these things, and we used that as an excuse not to do anything about it. But you can see in countries like New Zealand or Wales with these well-being budgets, you put smart minds to work thinking about how can we measure social well-being, civic well-being, as Sophie said. If we can measure these things, then we can manage them. And if we can manage them, we can improve them. And I think, there's a real opportunity for people to measure and manage differently in a much more sustainable way. So that's my final word. Sorry, it took a little bit longer, Jörg, but I've really enjoyed this panel.
Actually, thanks. So this hour was flying by. I feel like we just started the conversation, but I also feel these many great insights and inspirations from our conversations were putting quite some weight on my head. So it's time to end today's panel, but not our conversations. And AOM invites you to stay in touch or get in touch with any further contributions on our debate. I thank our esteemed panelists, you, our valued audience, and the Academy of Management. And with that, I hand over back to Michael.
Great. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much, everyone. And once again, if you'd like to get in touch, email press@aom.org. Thank you all. Have a great day.